Care has the power to bring kindness where it's needed. It brings out the best in every one of us. It doesn't just see people. It takes time to understand them. It puts the needs of others ahead of its own. And when you start with care, you end up with a very different kind of bank. Truist. Truist Bank, member FDIC.
It takes a lot of ingredients to fix or build a car, like cooking, but without the frozen dinner easy way out. eBay Motors has 122 million parts. It's always the right fitment, so you can follow any recipe to a T. Whether it's a vintage Italian coupe that's classic like Grandma's meatballs or a German luxury car that's as complicated as Oma's rouladen, to cook up something great in the garage, use the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Hey everyone, this is the Almost World Podcast. Bringing to you mind-blowing interviews with guests from all over the world. So settle down, relax, and enjoy the show. Oh yeah, by the way, if you like the podcast, please support Elmo's World Podcast on Patreon. Your support is what helps the podcast improve more and more. 3. Welcome to Elmo's World Podcast. This is Elmo Ador Jr., your host, and I am with my friend Johanan Raatz. Hey man, can you introduce yourself?
My name is Johanan Raatz. I run a channel, the same as my name. Background is physics and philosophy. And right now, well, actually, my channel specifically, it focuses on something called quantum idealism, which is basically an attempt to synthesize idealism with physics, and it comes from digital physics originally, which shows that the world is made of information rather than matter. And specifically, one of the things that is driving this is something called emergent space-time in a field called quantum gravity, which is the attempt to unify quantum mechanics, which is the physics of the very small, with relativity, which is the physics of the very large, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so what they're discovering in the process of this is that space is actually an illusion, which is quite extraordinary if you think about it. So if space is an illusion, well, that means that everything inside of space is also an illusion, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this is just a very kind of a basic level argument, a basic level intuitive argument, as it were, just to kind of kick the whole thing off. You think of that just on face value. Okay, whole world's an illusion, as it were, but it's based on, there's a reality to it, but it's a reality that's deeper than what we see as the physical world around us. Then you contrast that, though, with the one thing that isn't an illusion, which is your own mind, right? So right there, it shows you that mind has to be more fundamental than physical reality, and hence one emerges from the other.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so can I ask you, is your worldview God exclusive, or is it?
Yeah, there's a God in it. There's
Okay.
well, the idea is that the world's contained, is basically simulated inside of a large mind. So
Mm-hmm. So would you call it your worldview in part Christian idealism, because, or
yes,
okay, well, in terms of that, can you dive more into I guess on the cosmology, like what does it mean for the universe to be like like the mind of God? Do you say that it's literally like in the mind of God, or are we in some different kind of modal ontology than different from what our dream state would be? Is it a different level?
well, it's like at a different level, I would say.
Okay. Can you talk more about what it is? Because I guess it all started with the double slit experiment, right? Like when we
Yeah.
realized that things exist because only because we observe it to exist, and it actually varies the result if there is an observer and there isn't. But is it, or do you like refer to more experiments that actually, I guess, prove?
That was the
Yeah.
first one, but there's so
Mm-hmm.
much more recent ones that
Mm-hmm.
test things, such as realism. Well, one example was, in double slit, you're asking where is the particle? Is it going through the slit, the first slit, the second one? And then you see it goes through both, and you try and identify it as going through one or the other, and then suddenly it stops behaving its weird wave-like properties disappear all of a sudden.
Mm-hmm.
So that raises the question of what does it have properties before you look at it, and there are ways to try and answer that. And one of those is with well, the idea is that there could be hidden variables that are telling you where the particle actually is.
Mm-hmm.
This was the idea that Einstein pursued for a while, and they had a test of this. Of a way to one way to test this is something called quantum non-locality. Okay, where you have
Mm-hmm.
two particles in a wave function together. Okay, so they're in a single probability wave, and you then separate them at vast distance. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
when you change one of them, the other one would change instantaneously in theory if the wave actually is fundamental to reality rather than just a description, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if that's the case, then if there are hidden variables, they would have to be not located in the vicinity. Okay, they have to be like, say you have one particle on the Earth, other one orbiting up in the ISS, which they've actually done by the way, in an experiment.
Mm-hmm.
If you were to change, like, say, the one in the ISS, it would instantly change to one on the Earth. And so if there is any hidden variable defining what the particle is, it would have to be non-local. It would have to be located up in the ISS or down on the Earth and affecting the other one instantly. Okay. So this experiment was really done. They call it Bell's inequalities, and they discovered quantum entanglement. So these particles actually affect each other at vast distances by being part of the same quantum probability wave.
Interesting. Okay. Well, okay. I want to dive into what the quantum entanglement is, because a lot of the audience are not familiar with it. Can you briefly give a gist of what it is?
Quantum entanglement is where you have two particles in the same quantum state together, and when you affect one, the other one changes instantaneously. So
Mm-hmm.
it's actually more like a good way to think of this is having, let's see here, say you have two socks, okay,
Mm-hmm.
and one is left and right, other one is right, okay, and if you take the left pair out here, well, you're going to know that the right pair is very far away, right? And that's
Yeah.
just a correlation. I mean, that doesn't require anything spooky to explain, right? Because one's right, the other one will have to automatically be left if you put it in a box. Well, the catch, though, is that in quantum mechanics, it's before you look at it, it's neither left nor right. They're in superposition together, okay?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a quantum sock which has it's neither left nor right. It's both and then what happens is you have two particles that are both and, okay, and they have these wave-like properties that behave both and, okay.
Mm-hmm.
And then if you change one of them, the other one changes. Basically, you collapse the state of one of them to being either left or right, and by doing that, it instantaneously fixes the state of the other one as being the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
And that would be the best way to describe quantum entanglement. They call
Okay.
that
Okay.
socks, by the way, putting Bertelsmann socks into quantum superposition, and that happens.
Okay. Well, okay. So coming from, I guess, proving that there are quantum entanglements in reality, right? So what implications has quantum physics drawn from this? And can you
Well,
explain more?
the reason what that would mean there is that whatever is going on underneath reality, okay, like at the basis of reality, it can't be explained with quantum mechanics. It cannot be explained with hidden variables, because if it was being explained with hidden variables, what that would mean is that, well, those states would be fixed. They would be determined before you look at them, and they're not. They're in superposition together, and you wouldn't be fixing the state of the other one instantaneously miles away. Now you could say that it's something going faster than light, that there's a hidden variable that's going faster than light that's doing that. The problem with that is that instantly violates special relativity. Okay. So what it tells you then is something quite fascinating. Number one, it tells you that the particle doesn't have any real properties before you look at it. But secondly, it tells you that whatever correlating those two particles is actually happening outside of space-time, because it can't go in space-time, because nothing in space-time travels faster than light. Make sense?
Yeah. Okay, so I
Which
guess
is kind of one of our first hints.
the quantum entanglement like follows rules that are transcendent of space and time.
Yes.
Okay, but wouldn't that when we refer to idealism, right? We're referring to this what the nature of reality is, and that what we see, what seems to be physical to us, is actually the mind of God, as you would refer to, right? But is that how you would define it? Is it because when we talk about like what exists, right? Like this physical reality could exist the same in the same like level as consciousness, but it's only like a different kind of formation of matter and atoms or something. I guess just the fundamentals are different, but they both of them exist the same way. They're part of reality. So how would you define the difference between a physicalist universe and an idealist one? Because in both worldviews, there is at least a thing there that exists. So I can't really put it up, pin it down into what the difference is. If you understood what I mean.
Well, the difference is that one is made fundamentally of matter, and the other one is fundamentally mind.
Okay, what was the difference though?
Well,
Wait,
in the mental one, the world is like a dream. In material one, the world is made of clockwork atoms, right? There's atoms, chunks of stuff floating in empty space. The other one, it's information and minds. And right now, we're discovering that the world is made of information.
Okay, but I guess when we refer to the physicalist worldview, right? It's not actually making like like at all levels this the ontology of what matter is just this, right? A physicalist could actually also include some sort of, I guess, deeper mechanics to it that could include something beyond imagination, beyond understanding, right? And so I guess if you define it that way, that the universe is much more than just matter. It's also an illusion, right? In the illusion of form of information. Okay, so I'm looking at where what the conclusion is from this, right? If the universe is information, then it's probably some sort of a hologram or some sort, like something like just all purely phenomena. If that's is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, essentially. I mean, that's what quantum gravity is telling us, that space is an illusion and emerges in quantum entanglement. So you have a world that's the fundamental level of reality is quantum entanglement.
Okay, so but how do you define God though in this God inclusive worldview, right? Like,
okay, so let's go to consciousness for a second, okay? And this is something called integrated information theory, and it came from the realization that everyone was having a hard time explaining consciousness, okay?
So I guess you're referring to the philosophy of mind, right? Like the nature of
Hmm.
consciousness. And I've talked
Yes.
to a lot of like idealists, and some of them gave me the I guess they concluded that the consciousness it's impossible for consciousness to exist in a physical reality, right? Because I guess consciousness is something that it needs something transcendent to remain as a thing, right? I guess that's how I understood it. Like, am I correct? Like, what is your take on that?
Um. Okay. So integrated information theory. They have this. They stopped asking the question. Okay, what is consciousness? Some people are saying it's immaterial stuff in the brain. Other people are saying it's an emergent thing for the brain. Other ones are saying it's a function, okay, etc. And everyone disagrees about consciousness, okay.
Mm-hmm.
However, what integrated information theory said was, let's flip this around, think about this differently, and then we have let's think about this entirely different fashion, and instead let's ask what consciousness is like, okay? Because everyone knows what consciousness is like, and what consciousness is like is ultimately what consciousness is. Because consciousness is the subjective perception of something, okay? And so what they said is, well, when you're conscious of something, say you're conscious of your computer screen, you have Elmo's rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you're looking at you have little bits of information. You have an orange nose in the middle. You have text saying Elmo's world, and you have little symbols in the background, etc. Those are all pieces of information, okay? And they're all integrated together in your mind, meaning it's not my mind, it's your mind, okay? So I don't know what's in your mind, except unless we're looking at the same thing, maybe, or something. And you don't know what's in my mind, okay?
Yeah.
And so it simply is information integrated together into a single whole, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Make sense?
Yeah. Okay. So
Um, so what then the idea was consciousness then is simply integrated information.
mm-hmm. Okay, so if consciousness is integrated information, like how does that lead us to God, though, right? Because usually the classical theist definition of God is this immutable, perfect, omnis, all of that. But how do you, I guess we could replace this hologram and universe with something like a really smart alien or advanced society of former humans. Like how how does that lead us to God, right? Like, or the classical God that you believe in.
Mind that contains all of existence, okay?
Mm-hmm.
That mind is by definition omnipotent, okay?
Mm-hmm.
And because it's able to control everything inside of it. Also, it knows everything, okay? Makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And then it is also omnipresent because it has access to everything. It exists in all points of space. It's stimulating all points of space. And so you have your three omnis. And that is kind of like the basic definition of a god is an omnipotent, omniscient, omnipresent being. I mean, very basic. I mean, you can add omnibenevolence and so on and other properties in there, but that's just like your very basic understanding of what a god is, right?
Yeah.
Your very so there you have a mind containing everything. There's God.
Okay. Okay. Well, okay, so in a way, if we have these conclusions from quantum physics that it is necessary for the this I guess a deity to create and form this structured universe of integrated information, right? So can we talk more about the specific parts of the religion, or are you, or do you more just prefer not to discuss, I guess, theology, or your take on the Bible, because you are a Christian, right? And then,
Yes, well, I'm able to derive the. This is kind of a much bigger topic that I wasn't planning to get into here. I kind
yeah.
of like reverse engineer little pieces of things that are seen as, theology in the Bible. For example, there's I first get into what we call the supernatural.
Mm-hmm.
The supernatural really is um it's the world behind the space time, right? And you just kind of like work out the mechanics of that. And so in this case, we're modeling the world as consciousness. And what you call the fallen state is actually fractured consciousness in that behind space time realm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when you do that, it actually turns out that it replicates the description of the fallen state seen on 6 different religions of what like the different things they would call it, you wouldn't even think of as being connected, are all replicated via modeling the fallen state as fractured consciousness behind space time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I guess that that's your defense of the miracles and the supernatural events in the Bible, I guess, because
Well, that's supernatural events are easy in that case because it's, I mean, if you're living in a video game
mm-hmm,
and someone reprogramming the video game, well, there you go.
mm-hmm. Okay, okay, like, okay, so w- w- you know, why does it have to be Christian though, right? Like, it could be a
It could be.
Hindu
Well, here's the
god,
thing
it
with
could
that.
be a Muslim
I'm
god.
sometimes asked about that.
Yeah.
The reason is that okay. So when you talk about Christian, in truth, it has pieces of a lot of different religions that can be verified with this, right?
Mm-hmm.
There is one thing that Christianity has that none of the other religions have, though, and that is that Jesus saves out of the fallen state, right?
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense.
Yeah, okay, so I guess Jesus is the solution to the problem of evil, right? Because
Yeah. Now, why does that work? Okay. So there are basically 3 different categories of what they call spiritual formation or attempts to solving leaving the fallen state. Okay.
mm-hmm,
There's this legalistic model seen in Islam and Judaism where people try and follow a law, right? And the idea is they can then follow this law and then that will, they'll become good enough or whatever, and they'll just leave the fallen state then, right? They'll
mm-hmm,
leave the spiritually developed that way. Okay. Now that the problem there is that kind of misses the point, right? You can obey rules, but if you're always like bound up in a sense, like you're always trying to if it's always causing like repression or whatever in you, it's not really gonna your spiritual state does not change anymore. And you may be living perfectly, but it's gonna be like a hell, right? You're gonna be living good stuff, but it's gonna be like a very painful existence, obeying all the
mm-hmm,
laws all the time.
mm-hmm,
Didn't really solve the problem there. You've solved you made things look good on the surface, and you made things work on the surface, but it hasn't really solved the core of the problem, right?
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Okay. Okay, so in a way that what you're saying is that Christianity has the best model that solves the problem of evil.
Yes. Now there is a third reason. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
a second model, which is a little tired still. It's called the Eastern model. Okay, and the idea here is that they recognize there's a spiritual condition issue. Okay, underneath, and they want to basically what they do is they want to try and go into the cell, like do spiritual practices, meditation, and so on, alter various things inside of their own spiritual state, and then try and like fix the problem, basically, right? Which is
Mm-hmm.
it's on the right track, right? I mean, they recognize that it's based on a spiritual there's a spiritual problem, as it were, that they're trying to fix. That the actions are just the kind of surface manifestation. And you see this with Buddhism, Hinduism, and like New Age practices, right? The catch, however, is that this doesn't ever work. And the reason this doesn't work is a really funny meme I've seen where it had Donald Trump in a Buddhist, monk robe, right? An orange monk robe.
Mm-hmm.
And he's here saying, I can transcend my ego better than anyone. There's no one who can transcend their ego better than me, right?
Mm-hmm.
Kind of hilarious because our president is, we love him, but one thing that we know about him is he has kind of an ego issue, doesn't he, right?
Yeah.
And so him bragging about him being able to transcend his ego is once again another manifestation of his ego, right? So they're trying to do that. They can't do it. It's fractured. Well, why is that though? And you look at that, the structural reason, because that's an extreme example, but in all cases, that's always the reason for it. And the reason for that is if you're trying to transcend your ego, which is fractured consciousness, aka fallen state, you're doing it from value sets that are located inside of your consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So in terms of Christianity, right? Though there
Mm-hmm.
are several models in terms of how the problem of evil is solved in Christianity, right? You have the Orthodox, you have the Catholic, you have the several Protestant, I guess,
I
models.
don't zoom in past that point. I have a model that actually looks maybe a little closer to orthodoxy in some respects, even though I'm Protestant.
Mm-hmm.
I don't specify beyond this point. At that point, I think it misses the point to try and zoom it in into like make it into like an ism or an ideology once it's past like Christianity. So the reason for this is let's suppose, here's an example. Let's suppose that you're a drug addict, okay?
Mm-hmm.
One value you have is to get high on drugs because it feels good, right? There's a sensation of feeling
Yeah.
good.
Yeah.
And then there's also withdrawal symptoms. You don't take drugs, and there is withdrawal, and the withdrawal is horrible, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that causes a lot of pain. Now, you may have another value that says, I'm going to get free of these drugs and be a normal person, right? And that may be strong enough, and you might be able to break out of your drug addiction this way, right? Because that one can overpower the other value set inside of you, okay?
Mm-hmm.
However, doing that is a conflict. There's two sets of values, and one of them is going to conflict with the other one, and it's going to cause pain when that happens.
I see.
Well,
Okay.
okay, so you might be able to get out of it though if you have both sets and one happens to be stronger than the other one. But now let's change the scenario a bit. Let's suppose that you are a soldier in war, okay?
Okay.
You're fighting for your country, okay? It's a very very honorable thing. You might think of it as good. You have your value set you're fighting for, which is you might even die for it. You die for your country, right? Your people back home that you love and so on. And that's good, right?
Yeah.
Problem now. What about the enemy? You're going to die for your enemy?
Oh no.
Because there are other fractured consciousness states there. The problem, though, is in war, you're not going to die for your enemy. You're going to blow your enemy to hell, aren't you?
Yeah.
Okay. Or that one, I forget the name of the Thin Red Line. It's a Mel Gibson movie where he says, Dear Lord, protect us on the battlefield and don't listen to any of the enemy's heathen prayers. And, like basically listen to our side and not the other sets of values, essentially.
Mm-hmm.
Now, with this, the thing with this is in that case, you can't really resolve that conflict because you don't have the values needed to not kill the other guy in the case of the soldier scenario, okay?
Mm-hmm.
In the war scenario. And why not? Well, because as a fractured piece of consciousness, you only have a limited set of values, and your enemy only has a limited set of values. And those values are in conflict. And because of that, you will never be motivated to try and love him because or vice versa, because those the values that are in both of your consciousness or consciousness systems will contradict one another, correct?
Yeah. Okay. So.
Okay. But now
Mhm.
here's the thing. So how to get out of that? what if you had a mind that contained both of your enemy's value, both your enemy's mind and your mind, like nesting
Mm-hmm.
minds? Well, to that mind, that conflict would no longer feel like a conflict. It would
Mm-hmm.
feel like a conflict, but it could be one that could be solved, correct? Because now it'll be more like the drug addict problem. You have
Yeah.
two sets of values, and you can find some solution between them, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
you have that are of both of them rather than just the one, right? And so it would be
Interesting.
painful to break out of that set, but you would still be able to do it, right? Whereas
Mm-hmm.
the two soldiers would be at an impasse fighting each other forever, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And then if you think about it, any conflict that is, anything that's evil is resulting of some kind of conflict of value sets down here, right? Someone wants to do something else that we consider bad because he values some good that he thinks it produces, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so think of it as the fallen state is simply constituted of these ego conflicts between conflicting value sets, right? And
Okay.
you can be able to solve some of them if both of them are contained in your mind. Others, if there is someone else, you have an impasse. You can't get past that, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
However, mind containing everything, right? AKA like a god, what you think of as a god, that god could take on all the pains needed to solve all of those ego conflicts, correct?
Mm-hmm.
And if it's gonna, if a god, in order to do that though, the god would have to experience a human form because, well, you have to be human to experience human pains, right? Which would mean
Oh,
you have to manifest as a human
that
in order to
that's
take on all those human.
very. I guess that's straying from Christian theology. If
Well, no,
that's.
that's replicating Christian theology, don't you see? That's what you see. What I'm saying, that explains what Jesus does, because now
Oh, right. Right.
Christianity say
Yeah.
Jesus incarnates and dying on the cross. That's taking on all the pains, including death, to resolve all the
Mm-hmm.
the fallen state essentially. And then once Jesus resurrects, you can ask him for salvation, and well, he saves you from the fallen state, right?
Okay, but before we dive into that, I just want a quick answer to this question. Like, how do you escape pantheism from that, though? Right? I guess.
That's pretty simple. It's pantheism is the view that God's mind is the universe. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
whereas this different view entirely. It's sometimes equivocated with pantheism, but it's a entirely different animal. It's called panentheism, and that is that God's mind contains the universe.
Yeah. Okay.
That's what this is.
Okay. So it's so in panentheism, right? Like, but when it
By the
so
way, Eastern Orthodoxy, I'm not an Eastern Orthodox, but the Eastern Orthodox Church is actually panentheist as part of their theology.
mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay, so but I guess you could continue on the part where Jesus's incarnation is, I guess, the was necessary for God to bypass this problem of, I guess, dissonance in the agents in the conscious agents.
Yes.
Okay. Oh, can you dive deeper into that?
Well, so the point is that in order to save from this fallen state, this incarnated deity, right, would have to then take on all the pains of all the pains needed to resolve all the various ego conflicts
Mm-hmm.
that constitute this fallen state system, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which is this Jesus on the cross, essentially, right?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. Okay.
And then you simply, connect with that. And that's the whole asking Jesus into your heart thing. That's the say being spiritually tuned with Jesus at that point, right? And then you're connected to that too, and now you get to rise above the fallen state as well.
Mm-hmm. But I guess I have a question here, though, right? Like, and it's
Yes.
I guess this argument has been used by a lot of like atheists or agnostics. Like, why is it necessary for God to apply rules upon himself, right? Like why is he, I guess, because like why couldn't he just forgive us, like for example, like from like a Muslim concept, like
Right,
what
because
is it?
that's not what's going on. It's a primitive understanding of what's going on. It's like you're assuming that God is somehow like offended in the way that he just like forgive someone for. Well, no, that's not what's going on. It's I mean, in a certain sense, it is right because he has to
Mm-hmm.
resolve conflicts, right?
Yeah. Okay, so what so you discussed what was going on, right? That there is this there's impasse that has to be solved. So at the end of it, right, do we become, I guess, like one consciousness again? Like
Well, it
the
would be a. I don't know if it'd be a completely because I think you retain your individuality and all that, but you would be say in harmony with all the other agents.
Okay, okay. But like looking at the nature of reality, because you positioned it in the idealist worldview, right? But and how about animal suffering, though? How do you confront that? Because but by the way, do you take the position of billions of years of evolution,
Yes,
or
but it's
okay?
guided evolution.
Yeah, guided
Evolution,
evolution,
how that
of
works as
course.
well, by the way.
But yeah, but how do you resolve the animal suffering part?
Well, what I do is I don't say okay. So that whole thing with ego conflicts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Don't my model does not differentiate between human and animal consciousness. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you're looking at it as an abstract model, and it says, well, there are different conscious agents with different value sets, and they conflict sometimes. Now, I don't get into that. That's a different matter. But I'm trying to derive the bare basic structural like skeleton of Christianity here, rather than you know how to deal with animals versus humans, which is not something I've really hammered out in my model much. Because I mean, from a physics point of view, they're both integrated information systems. There's not much difference between them in a physics sense, except that one has reason and the other one is, we're much more intelligent than the animals, and we have certain capacities of intelligence that animals don't have.
Mm-hmm.
But in
Okay.
terms of trying to look at this as a science, you know, I don't really explore that too much,
Okay.
honestly.
Okay. 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 So, in terms of God being this panentheist creator, with all these divine qualities, how, I guess, do you, I guess, refer to your morality on a divine command, right? Like what is your moral framework, I guess? And it's just is it the normal Christian theology, and that's where you base what is right or wrong? Like, how do you view that?
Well, that's then you're going into ethics instead of theology, which is a different area. But you could do what I've argued before is that there's something I call this universal intersubjectivity.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, what it is okay. So you've probably heard of the Euthyphro dilemma, right?
Yeah.
Okay, and so basically, what the problem is it says if God is above morality or determines morality in some way, then in essence, what this means is that
The morality is subjective to God.
yeah, but that makes it Nietzschean. Now it's no longer objective morality now, is it? It's
Yeah.
just Nietzschean morality again.
Yeah.
God, and in this case, it's might makes right, but God is all powerful, and so therefore, see.
Yeah. So how do you solve that?
Well, so the argument is that if God's mind contains all value sets, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens is that well, God's value set is subjective. It's also a subjectivity that held by every last other mind in there, because everyone's minds are, everyone's value sets are rooted in God's value set. And so therefore no value set properly ordered is ever contrary to God's value set. And so the value, what then is wrong is only disordered value sets. For example, someone wanted to get high, right? Well, the desire to be elated is a good value. They're just pursuing it the wrong way, in a kind of a distorted way.
Interesting. Okay, so I guess there are two kinds of value sets, right? There's the what you said with the disordered and the ordered ones. But but I guess being an agent of morality, like I'm a, like if a person who has disordered value set of morality, even if it's disordered, it is, to me, I guess, my basis. Therefore, it does it mean that I it's not included in God's uh, universal value sets that are ordered, because disordered ones aren't included in God's
No, they're there, but they're in. So in God's frame, He's got all the same value sets that we would have. Because He's containing all of our value sets. He has them as well. It's just that from His frame, He has them in a non-distorted fashion. See?
Interesting. Okay. So I guess that's how you view morality, right? Like, but ultimately, I guess you would look at it more in terms of how we act in daily life, right? It's more of accountability, right? Uh,
Right.
that whatever I'm going to
Well,
do,
a
no.
simple thing would be, like say you you hurt somebody else. That's wrong, because now you're, you're trying to attain some good at the expense of somebody else's good, which is by definition fractured.
Mm-hmm.
It's not
Mm-hmm.
ordered with universal intersubjectivity, because universal intersubjectivity is something that is by definition good for everyone.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, so but I guess when I look at it, like when you say universal intersubjectivity, I understand it that God consists, I guess God is qualified to be the basis of objective morality, because he consists of all the ordered uh s- ordered value
All value
sets.
sets ordered in such a way that they are consistent with each other.
Yeah, okay. Okay, but when it comes to, I guess, like the normal Christian life, right? Like I guess I might have a disordered value set, but I guess that's irrelevant, because ultimately I will be judged by the, God's objective morality, which is how you
Right.
defined it. And so my question would be like, how would we determine what the God's value set is, based on what our position is in the universe now, which there are many things that we can't be sure of, especially when it comes to applied ethics. So how would you arrive and to know what God's value set is?
You mean like specific ethical frameworks?
Yeah. Be,
Well,
mm-hmm.
here's one that I reverse engineered specifically, okay? And this one gets into a little more detail, okay? So remember I said that consciousness consists of fractured values. The fallen state consists of essentially fractured consciousness behind space-time, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Well, there are two types of values when it comes to valuing something. You can have a initiative value set or a receptive value set, okay?
Mm-hmm.
Now, what it turns out is that this is called the principle of gender in certain Neoplatonic philosophies. But the idea is that what you're calling initiative and receptive are actually masculine and feminine traits. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
and so they have to be ordered in a male to female ordering system. Okay, and this actually forms the basis at a very very minute microscopic level, as it were, like a elementary level. of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And so this would, in this case, replicate very basic Christian sexual morality, because you then have, you need to have, for example, it has to be ordered in a male to female fashion. It has to be ordered in a one-on-one fashion, rather than, if you have an imbalance between value sets or what have you, or one initiating and trying to initiate into multiple value sets, it doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
So it doesn't really match together.
But basically, what you're presenting though is that you're saying that you could show a quantifiable model of an objective moral framework that is corresponding to God's absolute moral judgment.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess can you give a more specific and detailed description of that? Like, let's say abortion, right? How would you
Well, that's
apply
simple.
that?
You're trying to obtain a good by someone else's evil. If you're trying to murder someone, you're trying to kill a person to obtain something good. That's not, that's obviously a disharmony between value sets, because you're denying someone else's value set altogether by killing the person.
Okay, so basically, any form of harm is evil, right? Like,
Yeah.
okay, so
Ultimately.
I know it's this would be, I get, but what, I guess, if if God's orders like the genocide, right? I wouldn't, Christians wouldn't call it genocide, but the killing of, let's say, women and children.
Okay. I don't know exactly in those cases, because honestly, I mean, I'd have to look at like a Old Testament scholar on that. That's not where I'm trying to.
Okay.
However, you could have a situation where someone deserves to die, like a murderer might deserve to die or something, and that's a whole different kind of situation.
Mm-hmm.
Ideally, that kind of situation would never exist, because ideally, in an ideal world, there wouldn't be murderers. But in this particular kind of situation, that would, something like that would exist, right?
Okay, so I guess there are factors and criteria to this, right? That you mentioned that are necessary for your model to work, right? That one is that someone has to deserve it, like this judgment, like it can actually be justified morally to kill someone as long as this person deserves it, right? Like,
Yes.
okay, so what situations specifically, like in war, like in,
Like a murderer kills someone, or say there's a
or
traitor,
self-defense, right? Like that.
or self-defense. Yeah, those kinds of things. That's a different type of thing, though, isn't it?
Okay. That's very interesting. Okay, that I've never heard of this, but I guess it does dive into some sort of moral realism, but I still can't see the basic axioms of this model of morality, right? Like, because can you describe what axioms you are you referring to? Like, I guess life is the most basic one, that basic element of this moral framework, right? It's
Well, I
the
say thievery, right? There could be
Mhm.
thievery.
Okay.
You're violating someone's right to their property by trying to obtain some good by violating somebody else's right to property.
Mm-hmm. So so it right, so natural rights are included in your model as well of.
Yeah,
Okay, so how
a
about,
foundation for natural rights.
so you would, how about slavery though? Like, would you say that
Well, that's
some,
obvious too. Well, that in that case, you're trying to obtain a good, which is free labor, free work, right?
mm-hmm, which is
From someone else's being enslaved, taking away someone else's value.
okay. Well, do you think that's any some, at least some form of slavery could remain within the moral framework. Like for let's say in a Christian in the New
Maybe
Testament,
if
right?
it's like, okay, if it's not really slavery, but like say indentured servitude where you're paying a loan back or something,
Mm-hmm.
but that's not really the same thing. But they sometimes use different words for these things back in the day. So
Okay, so it's not really technically like
yeah,
evil
in that
slavery.
cultural context, they would call things slavery. Okay, in ancient Near East, they call certain things slavery that you know, we would just say that's just paying a loan back.
Mm-hmm.
So
Okay, so
they're
I guess
using the word differently
yeah,
than
yeah,
we are.
yeah. Okay, okay. I guess we've taken a look at your moral framework, and still sort of vague for me, but okay. Um, I guess like you being a Christian, right? And you've taken this
Hmm.
idealism worldview. Can you talk about more as to what your journey of being a Christian is? Is it the typical one that like you're living your
Well, I
crap?
started out with a typical one, yes, but I
Mm-hmm.
over integrated pieces of philosophy into it. I was trying to develop an objective framework of it because most people just like take it on faith as is
Yeah.
and you assume it. And they even have an entire branch of apologetics that does that. It's called presuppositionalism. And I'm trying to provide a objective foundation for what I believe. And so then I work all these details out of, well, what is God? What is reality in relation to God? What is this thing we call the supernatural? And then I hammer more things out. Well, what is ethics in this thing? How does objective morality derive, and so on? And yeah, and so then I eventually integrated this into like a metaphysical framework.
Mm-hmm.
And this happened, slowly over time. I started off from the original position, and I just
Okay, okay. Okay, so but right now, right, like where you are, I guess you still believe in the Trinity, in the fundamental
yes, I
Christian
derived the Trinity. In
doctrines.
fact,
Okay. Okay, so, but okay, can you discuss more at least like because you're someone who's not a presuppositionalist, right? Like you're actually deriving
yes.
something from something objective. But this is the challenge
Hmm.
that I've been facing. Like, how can we arrive at the Trinity from natural theology? Because like
Okay,
absolute
so
divine simplicity would be the best, like simplest, or guess the direct
um,
conclusion.
well, can you play videos on your thing here?
Uh, I guess it's an audio podcast, but I can see it. If
Okay,
you
it's
share
called the
screen.
Integrated Triad. It's 9 minutes long. I'd recommend any people watching the podcast go and check it out.
Okay, cool.
It's a little bit complex, but it's basically I show that a structure exists in a maximally simple logical system that exactly replicates the trinity of three semantic elements existing, and one of each of the semantic elements contains the entire system, including the other two semantic elements. So the meaning of the whole is contained in each of the parts,
Mm-hmm.
and therefore each of the parts contains the whole essentially.
Mm-hmm.
And then I show that that structure actually applies to how quantum information integrates into quantum integrated information, so
Mm-hmm.
aka conscious agents
Mm-hmm.
or conscious. And so that we have three of them, three separate mental identities, as it were, each described by a conscious agent that then subsumes the entire mind.
Mm-hmm. Okay, but I guess like we I can focus on the number three though, right? Like, why can't it be four, like, or
Because if
five?
it does that, then you have a situation where it's not maximally simple anymore, and you can then separate one element out and have it in theory be isolated from some of the other elements. And if that's the case, then it's no longer the largest possible mind containing the whole system.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, I guess that I would love to watch that video and after this. Okay, but I guess one last question, Johanan, and I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I know it's a bad time for you because like you sleep in the day.
Hey,
Yeah.
yep.
Same as me. But I guess we're the
You have
opposite
a
side.
night shift too?
Yeah, this is my night shift. I sleep in the day. But
Uh,
okay, so I guess my question would be one last because like what direction are you taking or is this path of finding a more an objective basis or framework for your Christianity? Like where do you think it's going? And how are you going to live the Christian life? I guess because you're
where
doing
is it
this
taking me?
because
Well,
yeah.
it's taken me actually a long because I have most of the model already derived such far. It's really interesting because I had a discussion with someone, okay, before,
Mm-hmm.
and they asked me, why am I they asked the question, why are you, you've heard of people who are spiritual but not religious?
Yeah. Yeah.
And they asked the question, why am I not that? Because I look so similar to it in some ways. And the answer was that I simply derived enough items that you would identify it as recognizably Christian.
Interesting.
And so it's kind of cool because it's blurring the line between Christian and spiritual but not religious. I mean, you can look at the stuff, you say, well, that is recognizably Christian. You've derived something that, what you're calling here is that's objective Christianity, and yet you've derived it in such a way that it's objective, that it's, you're starting with non-Christian premises to derive them, shall we say.
Interesting. Awesome. That I would love to I guess watch more of your videos and yeah, I really agree with that. Like I guess when it comes to presuppositionalist, right? Like I think that's my worldview because like when I would call myself an agnostic theist, but do you define yourself as like a gnostic theist that you actually
I'm a
know?
Gnostic theist. I mean, I don't really know. I have some basic philosophic proofs that are very strongly argue for idealism.
Mm-hmm.
At this point, I don't even know what could possibly convince me to be an atheist. I know too much.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there are times when I've wanted to be an atheist, so
Interesting. That okay. Well,
I wasn't able to.
yeah. Okay,
Believe
but
me when I tell you, there were times when I was very, very angry with things, and yeah, I very much wanted to be an atheist.
yeah, but when you just look at it philosophically and looking at even at quantum mechanics, Christianity provides the best model, I guess. Objectively.
Yeah,
Okay.
of
Okay.
course, the framework in which it's derived is not explicitly Christian, but that's the whole point. If you want to derive something objective, you want to base it on something.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, hey man, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really love the talk. Like I learned so much. And I hope you have a great sleep tonight. Today, I mean.
Yeah, my days and nights are all backwards.
So that's the end of it. Thanks for tuning in, guys. This is your host, Elmo Ador Jr. And thank you for listening in. And please subscribe. Please follow us on Facebook. Please follow this. Please. Thanks.
It used to be hard to find the exact auto parts you needed, and that meant spending a lot of time at swap meets. It's a different game now when you can order exactly what you need from eBay Motors. They have 122 million parts, so you can always find the right fitment. Spend less time searching and more time building with the eBay Motors app or visit ebaymotors.com. Let's ride.
Holidays are here, and so is fashionable fitness. Gift yourself a Samsung Galaxy Z Flip 3 5G, a phone that folds in half to literally stand on its own. Pair it with the Galaxy Watch 4 for ultimate wellness and wow factor. Check health stats, flex personal records. Over 90 activities can be tracked, like biking, swimming, golfing, and more. Invest in yourself with tech made to crush goals. Holidays open up with Galaxy. Shop it all at Samsung.com. 5G connection and availability may vary. Check with carrier. Products sold separately.